Hey everyone, good morning or good evening or whatever time it is wherever you are. It's very nice to have everyone together and welcome to Virtual Dalcroze Meetup. I think, is it number 23? Crazy. So here we are in our 23rd little gather some friends together. Um, we have a very nice slate for the meetup today with Andrea and with Guy presenting a little bit today. We also are coming off the high of Fabian Bautz's masterclass this weekend. And so we have we have no shortage of things that we could discuss and talk a little bit about. So as has been our protocol, we're going to take just 2 minutes to throw everybody into a couple quick breakout rooms and let you introduce yourself to anybody else that's there. And in those rooms, can you just tell your name, if so willing, would you just introduce yourself with your name and where are you located? And either who do you teach, who did you use to teach, or who do you wish you taught? So talk a little bit about that. And then you don't get much time. I'm going to pull you right back in about 2 minutes. So here you go. Say hi to your neighbors. Whoop, here now, say hi to your neighbors.
Whatever.
Hey everyone, welcome back. And looks like we picked up another friend or two while we were introducing. So it's so good to have everybody together. We have two guest presenters today. The first is Andrea Girado, who I'll do my best to say her name. She can do better than me. Andrea, we met as a scholarship recipient. She had asked, is there any way to kind of help with that? And we are so excited to do that for absolutely anybody for whatever reason you might need. If it would make it easier for you to attend things, we've had a very generous network of colleagues who have supported this initiative. And so there's actually a little pot of money that is dedicated for people and hopefully to bring in new faces that would help them make it easier to participate in what we've been doing. So Andrea is joining us today to share a little bit. And so Andrea, we've got about 5 minutes and then we'll take a little time. So I hand it over to Andrea.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Yes, I wanted to give back to the community that has been supporting that I can join Dawn's dance classes that are amazing on Saturdays. So thank you. This is part of me giving back. I am a full-time doctoral student at Temple University. I'm doing my doctoral studies in music therapy. And part of that scholarship that I have at Temple is teaching undergraduate music therapy classes that are experience-based. And one of the experiences that I tried online with them on Zoom and that worked really nicely is a singing meditation, I call it, because what we do is basically we tone, we hum, we connect with our voices, and we practice acceptance and presence. It's also a way to soothe ourselves. When we sing, we self-regulate, right? Our breath starts taking over and brings us to the present moment. And then we learn to accept whatever happens because Zoom will prioritize some microphones and will let others be heard in a random way. So my invitation to you all is to take a little time to connect to the breath, to yourselves, and find a comfortable position with as little tension as possible in the body, perhaps finding some grounding the feet, recognizing if there is any tension in the body, just observing it. And you can choose whether you want to open your microphone and share your sound and your voice, or if you want to stay muted and explore at your own pace at home. I have a surety box that's gonna be our support sound. And we're gonna sing our tone on top of it and see what happens. My suggestion is that we focus on two things. One of them is exhaling as long as we can. So making the breath out as long as possible. And then the body is in charge of allowing the air to come back in. And then there is that pause before and after every breath. So enjoying that process. And also the process of vibration that happens in our body. So identifying where is the sound vibrating inside. When we sound, we kind of give ourselves a little massage, and it's a really loving self-care practice. So here we go. I'm gonna be playing for about 5 minutes. Again, feel free to mute and unmute your microphones if you are feeling exploratory. And yeah, here we go. You can close your eyes if that helps you get some, get in that inner space. Or if not, I invite you to find a place to focus your eyes with a soft gaze. And if so far you have not made a sound or unmuted your microphone, I invite you to take 1 minute where we just all sound and let's explore what that is like. One last minute, some bravery. Let's stay with the breath a little bit more, just noticing the air.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you all.
It's a real delight to have some different things to include and to be talking about. It'll be easy for us to have there are all sorts of stuff we could discuss about that. We'll come back to that. I'd like to introduce our good friend, Guy Mendelo. Guy, what town are you in? I'm not sure.
I am in Boston, Massachusetts.
That was my guess, but I couldn't remember for sure. So Guy is in Boston. Guy, I'm just gonna hand it over. Guy, we've asked Guy for a slightly longer thing. He's got about 10 minutes, so it's all you, Guy.
Hey, I'm just gonna share my screen here to get us ready. So many of us here are have either engaged deeply in Velcros or in the process of engaging deeply with teacher training. And one question which I think is pertinent is how do the skills and perspectives that we cultivate as part of Velcro's teacher training also bleed out into other areas? And what implications might these kinds of perspectives have when we bring it back and look back on our work as teachers in training or having been through teacher training, and specifically about the Dalcroze examination process. And I'd like to share with you an experience that I recently had. It's funny how this year doing something so seemingly normal is anything but normal. In the pandemic, I had an opportunity to write and produce and premiere a performance. And premiering a performance is always a big deal to me, but in the pandemic especially, it became anything but normal. The performance is called Radio Plays, and it is a series. Radio Plays is like a performed podcast. Each episode unpacks a timely theme through a collection of stories, whether told through the spoken word or through musical segments. Music in Radio Plays plays an essential role. The music is continuous, and each scene is connected one to the other through modulatory connective pieces. There are themes and motifs that recur throughout that help the stories dialogue with one another. The pilot episode, which was written and presented during the pandemic, juxtaposes real-world stories of resistance and resilience. So, for example, a Black teenager's aspirations in 1980s Chicago begins to dialogue with those of young Hungarian Jews serving the resistance and escaping from a World War II Arrow Cross work camp. An immigrant's struggles contrast with heart-rending advice from a Black father to a Black son about growing up in a country that is stacked against him. Radio Plays, like most of my work, is driven by 3 C's. Through efficacy and craft, we move people, and this is where our musical training comes in. By moving people, we inspire personal connection. Connection, in turn, impacts the way that we see the world. It impacts consciousness, and it adds perspective to questions about events that we experience. And this matters because over time, the sustained, deepened inquiry strengthens our awareness of often tacit assumptions, the silent stories we tell ourselves about the ways that we relate to the world and to one another. And over time, this increases informed agency in choices that we make. Directing and writing and premiering a show during the pandemic meant a number of firsts. To begin with, I was not able to work with the crew of musicians that I normally work with. And it opened up an opportunity not only to work with some artists with whom I'd wanted to work, but also write in different ways. So this became an opportunity to write for a string quartet for the first time. It was also my first experience creating a virtual performance. It was my first time playing piano on a performing arts stage. I normally play other instruments and occupy different roles. And because of the pandemic, not only was it the first time jumping through the kinds of hoops that we needed to jump through in order to keep one another safe, but it was also certainly the first time that a show that I have written was rehearsed and learned in one day and filmed in the next. As I was writing it, it became apparent that the work that I was doing in my Dalcroze world was bleeding over. And by this I mean that polyrhythms, use of harmony and harmonic progressions, approaches to phrasing, dynamics, certainly approaches to modulations, were all creeping into this writing from work that I was doing in my Dalcroze self. But more than anything, it was fluidity. In some respects, this first episode of Radio Plays was some of the more challenging writing that I had taken on simply because of all the firsts. But in other respects, it was written with greater ease and fluidity. And it's this question of ease that I want to get at. Because oftentimes, as artists, we ask a question, maybe not out loud, but implicitly, which is, what can you do? And I think that that's not the right question often, because usually the answer is, well, yes, we can do it. I think the question is better phrased at what can you do that is seemingly automatic? Maybe a fuller way of articulating the same question would be, what can you do that is beautiful and elegant on the one hand, and on the other, effortless enough that you can do it while attending to other complexities. And this, of course, is far too many words. And so we normally compress all that into this term that we call intuition. There was a big period of my life that I assumed that intuition was a fixed quantity, something that you had or you didn't have. Something that if you were fortunate, you could tap into, and if not, well, good luck, that's unfortunate. In large part, my work in Dalcroze and in other areas has shown me that intuition is not a fixed quantity, and it's not something that you're born with. Intuition is something that you train and that we can expand. And one way to think about the ways that we expand intuition and train intuition is by thinking about attentional space. If you can imagine, we all have an attentional space. And right now it is symbolized by this blue square. For some people it is larger, for others it is smaller. And the good question is, what can we do what is it that we do that contracts our attentional space? Which is a nice way of asking what can we do to enlarge our attentional space, but that's for another time. Suffice to say that when we assign ourselves tasks, like playing for a Dalcroze class, that task occupies a certain amount of room in our attentional space. Now, supposing that the task occupies this much space. With Dalcroze, it's rarely a question of, can you do it? The answer is yes. The question is, can you do it easily enough? How much room in your attentional space does a task take over? And a task like this leaves you little room to attend to other complexities. Right now, we can imagine that if the task itself of playing for this particular exercise takes up this amount of room, we have only the periphery left to attend to other complexities like watching our students or being able to modulate on a dime. Now, the more that we practice and the more that we learn, the more that the task begins to take up a little bit of space. Now we have much more room to attend to complexities of subtlety and nuance. And it is this shifting tasks from taking up a great amount of attentional space to smaller and smaller and smaller amounts of attentional space that I think that Dalcroze was referring to when he was talking about automation. What does this have to do with the examination process? If the question is not what can you do or whether you can do it, but what do you have deep enough in your bones that you can do it even when your attentional space is shrinking? Or put another way, it's well and good to be able to do something in the comfort of your own studio when you are master of the circumstances and everything is quite under your control and perhaps you have a nice mug of tea beside you. But what can you do when you are frustrated, when you are shaken off your guard and driven off your balance? I think probably a better way to symbolize the examination process for most of us looks more like this. Especially when I think about people who are entering the Dalcroze examination process or the Dalcroze training process, and we look at a list of requirements that is from here to Timbuktu, full of requirements that we must have under our belt, and it seems endless and it seems daunting and it can be frustrating because the question is, isn't this supposed to be about expression? Isn't this supposed to be about creativity? And here you give me a laundry list from here to Timbuktu. This is not automation, you're making me an automaton. That may be the short view, right? The long view, given this perspective on intuition training and automation, is that getting these tasks into our bones, so deeply into our bones, that we can perform them even when we're destabilized and even when our attentional space is shrunk by the stress of the examination process. This shows us what we own and what we don't own. And once we own it, that is really just the beginning. These are the things that we need to be able to do without even thinking about them in order to be expressive, in order to be creative. You could say that what we're speaking about in the process of intuition training is really nothing more than what we normally talk about when we're talking about practice or learning. And of course, the answer is yes. Dalcroze education is not unique because it aims at fundamentally different objectives. Rather, it disaggregates those objectives into smaller and smaller components that we can tackle. And it gives us principles and it gives us strategies to meet those objectives more effectively. You can also say that this process of learning is shared by many disciplines and pursuits. And of course, the answer here is, again, yes. But music is especially enigmatic because here is something that we cannot see, we cannot touch. It is ephemeral. These notes are created and then they're gone, which is why the principles of intuition training and the strategies towards practice and learning that Dalcroze education provides are all the more valuable. These are some of the many gifts of Dalcroze education. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Guy. What a really nice meetup. I love the juxtaposition of Andrea's singing, humming, and Guy's really getting us to think about our practice. I think both are introspective and but obviously in a very different kind of way. So how much fun. Well, as always, I'm at no shortage of words that I could invent to comment on either of these, but I think we do best when I let all of you lead. So can we comment a little bit on either of the humming, singing exercise with Andrea, or of this sort of look into Guy's use of the word intuition? We maybe as you were going along, you had some other words that you might use in place of his word intuition, or other ways of using it. And I think for those of you who are aware of or interested in the Dalcroze examination process, which, just in case anybody's not in the loop, we're meaning here the hurdles that we jump through if we would like to become certified or licensed or diplomed, which are just part of the hierarchy of the Dalcroze world. Even before that, though, before he mentioned these examinations, it's just the idea of what it means to perform, and to perform with that amount of space or not. So what sorts of ideas, what's anybody want to think about or talk a little bit about? Jeanette?
So with Andrea's voice meditations, so by the end I felt calm, and I thought, oh, maybe it's easier to have some sound than just soundless meditation. And I relate to my recent that the piano students have to perform, and he was very nervous when he performed, and so we're trying ways to be calm. So I was thinking that maybe I could try this to have the preparation before performance, that you spend a few minutes just feeling that, or also practicing that feeling, and then when you go to the exams or go to the performance, that you don't feel tight and nervous, and your body can be relaxed. And so the trick that I told him was to think of the back of your neck and your head when you play. So he was doing that. He succeeded, and he was much calmer, and he was very happy. He said, from now on, I'm going to do that all the time. So that's my thoughts from your exercise.
Very nice. Other thoughts? Let's talk about Andrea's exercise just for a minute. Other things that was occurring to you as you participated or as you watched? The one thing that one of the things that I am constantly thinking of, and this is about me, this isn't about Andrea or her exercise, is how would I use this, or how would I present this, or what would be my hurdle in doing this? And I'm a terribly flawed man. I have many things that are wrong with me when it comes, to the way I apply things. And so one of the things that I think of with that is, man, how long that took and how much trust it placed in the class. So one of my knee-jerk reactions, which is not one of my best traits at all, is often, I think, underestimating my students and thinking I need to fill in all the little bits to get to the point where they are super confident. And I really appreciated the way Andrea presented it, which is also on other parts of my skill set. I'm actually can be good at this, where I'm like, no, I'm not asking you if you can do this or if you want to do this or if this is appropriate for right now. I'm just telling you, this is what we're doing. And I really liked that the way she approached it was, well, of course, I'm going to play my instrument and you're going to hum and you're going to sing along. And you don't need more instruction than that. And I'm curious, Andrea, do you have opinions about, is that the pacing for adults, or is that the pacing that works just as well for middle school kids? Or does anybody in the room who works with different populations feel like you would have felt the need for a different adjustment with a different crowd? What do you, Andrea, maybe you would start.
Yes, I have tried with kids, 10, 12 years old. They love it. We did it, of course, in a more playful way, where I was just like, okay, I'm going to play this and you're going to do whatever your voice wants to do. But do it and try it. I think it works just as well. Of course, the process is more internal than external. That inner voice saying, oh, you're not gonna make it, like you're judging yourself, you're filtering yourself and your own musicality. That's so prominent, right? Because I think this is my assumption, but I think everyone hears a voice in their head wanting to sound, but are you gonna let it or are you gonna not?
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's all great and such nice ideas right there. You know, obviously, or maybe not obviously, just to point out that Jacques Dalcroze was sort of a pioneer in this idea of mind-body. He was using sort of mind-body descriptions and mind-body awareness and mind-body as sort of this unified thing, or something that aspires to be unified. I certainly, before the rest of the academy was anywhere near catching up to these kinds of ideas. And it took many years until now, finally, we have all sorts of scholarship that is saying there is no such thing as mind, there is no such thing as body. There is just this, they're constantly, part of the same big back and forth. And he was very hot into this idea of sort of synchronizing or aligning or, bringing together a shared awareness that both things are there. And to me, that was one of the bits that I found, useful or impressive as we just went through such a exercise. Anybody else, an idea or two? Selma?
Following on that, I was really interested that you urged people to go fully with the breath, the out breath, and then take breath back. It was actually causing us to think about breathing or experience breathing in a more conscious way, because we were not only making the sounds and listening to ourselves and in a way free to go wherever we wanted to in sort of musical space, but also there was a kind of deep connection I found with the experience of fully following the breath to the outer limit and then coming back. I love that. I thought it was really a revelation to do this with this group in this way.
Very good. Melissa?
Yes, thank you, Andrea, for what you offered. One thing I really enjoyed, I was muted most of the time, but one thing I enjoyed about it is I found myself doing a very simple vocal exploration that was taking me from a consonant tone that was maybe like a half step away from like what I felt was like the home tone of the Shruti box, and then melding into that home tone. So sort of, I felt like, I know that happens a lot in, in Indian music, so there's this, but there's this wonderful feeling of the tension and then the release. And so I thought, gee, that's something one could explore more. And also it's just such a beautiful metaphor for life, how we're sort of off our balance and then we find our center, and then, we're in some kind of conflict, and then we have a repose. So lot there. Thank you.
And thank you for that. I mean, that's also maybe is somebody's definition of the solfege class, you know, finding the consonants, getting off of our balance, finding back in balance. One of the statements that I give to my students regularly, especially when I'm introducing our work to them, is I say, music is supposed to feel as just a statement of its own. This is a point. In case nobody's ever told you this, I'm just going to tell you, music aspires to feel in a visceral, tactile, exact kind of way. And what Melissa and Selma, and I think really what the exercise, one of the things that the exercise sort of encourages is that I don't want you to merely make sound. I want you to notice that it sounds in your body and that there is this tactile sort of response to what's going on. It isn't merely sound or auditory, it is visceral as well. And so, which in that respect makes it deeply Dalcrozian. And so it fits very well with our sort of normal agendas. And then we might think of all the ways that we could take that basic model and either let it be just as it was, which was perfectly complete and as it wouldn't need to be adjusted in any way. But then we could take that as the basis for some kind of solfege class, where we think about being in and out and stable and unstable and with the group and out of the group, and look for variations then on it as we would go. It's lovely and so much fun. Thank you again, Andrea. We can keep on going. Fabian, and then I want to talk a little bit about what Guy shared with us. So Fabian, you're up. You have to unmute.
Maybe another aspect, because the transmission of the sound of the Shruti box was fragile, I felt myself encouraged to even be more stable in my exhaling and in my humming, to keep the continuity that was not possible through our satellite and whatever system, how it works, that we can be here together. So I think it's courageous to try something like that with sound, but each of us individually, we can participate and contribute that it will be one sound in this world, each of us in his or her place, even though the Shruti box is not always completely in a continuum. Thank you, Andrea.
Very nice. Andrea, are you aware of the button that says turn on original sound?
Yes, and I actually turned it on. That's just as much as it gets.
Yeah, I was just curious if the original sound was on or off, because it would definitely, anytime you do multiple audio strings in Zoom at the same time, we anticipate that it'll be a bit of a conflict, or it'll be a little bit tricky. And so sometimes that original sound button can help. Sometimes the automatically adjust the volume button deselected can help. But it was interesting that as Fabian caught it, and I think probably all of us had an element of this, is, all right, so this is coming through unstable. Does that mean that the exercise is wrecked, or does it just require a different response out of me? And I think because we had the time, I think that I would bet that most everybody found some sort of response. Again, thank you. As we heard Guy presenting, so first of all, Guy, so cool. All the main stage performance, and to find ways to rehearse and to get the performance to happen at this time is, it's just a feat in its own. And then you led us through this little journey of thinking about what we do and sort of what parts of the Dalcroze training or practice was informative. So did that speak to anybody here in the crowd? Anything that he said sort of strike you? Melissa?
I certainly don't want to monopolize the responses, but I just want to say quickly to Guy, thank you for getting us thinking in these ways. What came up for me, because I feel like intuition works like all the time at all levels, for any age, any skill level, it's there for us. But what I think is what I was coming for me and what you said about the automation, I feel like in the Dalcroze, like that helps us to have this really wide, you know, palette of things, or you know, I guess they use the word toolbox, but you know, it's like our wide range of things we can choose from because we've experienced so many things. But you know, as someone who teaches improv to all different ages, and my little ones, you know, I have them improvise, and they're using their intuition and they're using the building blocks they have to create. So I feel like you can create at any level, and I, you know, and I know you know that. But I think that, you know, what you're saying is like this really, like even more expansive range that one has through all of those skills one develops, and often you know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for things that are difficult to become automatic. But once they are, that's, you know, that's a point where you have more freedom because you have even more you can choose from. That's the point, not to have so many, you know, hard things, but to have more freedom to choose and create. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you, Guy, and always so lovely to see you, and I congratulate you on your work.
Thanks.
What else? Who else has some ideas about it? Jeanette?
So I was also thinking intuition, automation, you know, of course, you know, when we practice, we master one thing and then it become more automatic and go on to the next. And then the task attention that you describe will become smaller, and then we can pay attention to other things. That's my understanding, right? That's what you're talking about. Am I right?
Well, yes, exactly. And at any given point, we can, you know, the practice never stops, but once the task becomes small enough that we can do it relatively effortlessly, then we can attend to greater levels of nuance and greater levels of subtlety, challenging ourselves, and we're always keeping ourselves on the cutting edge. It's just that what had once taken up an enormous amount of space in our attentional space no longer takes up the same amount of space. But this is always the process of learning. I mean, this is the process of learning how to walk. Anybody who has a child and who knows how much effort it is to learn how to walk, learning how to walk, we can leap, you know?
So I was thinking about on the teaching side that also another thing that come to my mind is experience. Like we accumulate our experience, let's say teaching experience, so that the more experience we have, the more freedom, and it becomes easier. You know what I mean, because you can anticipate what's going to happen, or you know, oh, if this will happen, that will happen, and then if I do this, it will happen. So so I just want to bring in this idea of the word experience too.
Very nice. Other thoughts about it? Dorita? Oh, you got to unmute, Dory. There you are.
My thinking in relation to Dalcroze is the rhythm of your instinct, the rhythm of your intuition that leads you to your result. And that's to me, the driving force of anyone's creativity. And when I think of Dalcroze and I think of the improvisation that he continuously sought from his movement people, the instinct to move within a rhythm that gave it the dynamic of the creativity. That's where I see your intuition coming in, which is the rhythm of the intuition that is strictly yours and unique to you.
Very
That's
good.
how I,
Thanks. Thanks
that's
so much,
how I
Tori.
connect Dalcroze.
Other thoughts about how Guy's presentation sort of aligns with the things you were thinking or that you've experienced? There, yeah, Andrea.
Oh, the presentation was amazing. Thanks. What I was thinking is that there are two spaces that happen with that process that you were presenting. There is the intake, like the receiving and practicing, that assimilating, right, and consolidating. And there is also the space for exploring. What is it that I know that I sometimes don't even know that I already know, right? So there is that balance between this is a space for exploring and discovering what is already integrated, and then there is the space to assimilate and make it part of you, right? So thanks for that.
Yeah, that idea of making it part of you, I like that wording very much. I think that was very much in what Guy was describing, and certainly what our experience as improvisers or as people getting ready to take exams. That idea that I think the exam part of Guy's presentation is useful for me because it sort of gives us this sort of like high level, like if you're going to survive the exam, you had to have gotten to some sort of, to a point. You can't just be barely holding on. You have to have found that part. And the idea of it being made a part of you is a really nice picture, or a nice way of thinking of it. That when you finally hit the threshold where it seems like, no, I'm not trying to do a thing at all. I'm just trying to show you something that is already here, or something that is already a part of me. When right before you said the word intuition, I forget what the exact couple words that were on the screen before, but you were building up to, and what do we call that? And then your word intuition, I filled in the word just good flow before that. So it was another way of saying like, we are awkward for a while or a long while, and eventually it becomes a part of us. And then what do we call that when it finally has become a good part of us, or when it becomes accessible to us? Again, and for all my dear friends here who have come to a million of these meetups and who have been a part of the Dalcroze community forever, I always think that we know that there are people who jump into these meetings who watch after the fact, who haven't grown up under the Dalcroze umbrella. And so I'll just remind us that the word eurythmics, we often say, comes from EU, which means good, and then rhythmics, or rhythm, which is flow. And so, a nice, very simple rule of thumb as to what's it all about? It's all about getting your good flow on, or finding that good flow. And that flow, I think, speaks to what Dorita was just describing about the rhythm as being the sort of guiding force, and to what Andrea is saying about it becoming a part of you. If you're constantly caught up in frictions, that's the part where you're still battling, and it requires overcoming those frictions, where you find this sense of flow in order for it to feel a part of you, where all of a sudden intuition, is now an applicable word, because I'm not forcing or making things happen. I'm just permitting what is there to show. Does that seem close, Guy, to the way you were thinking?
It does, yeah. I chose the word intuition deliberately because I think that we use it a lot and we're not always clear, I think, about what we're saying when we use it. And also because the idea that intuition is a fixed quantity is something that I think is useful to get away from. And this is, for example, I was just meeting with a group of high school students, theater makers, and they're very much in this idea of inspiration, in intuition, as though you either have it or you don't. And and this is just not the work of creativity. Inspiration is wonderful when it happens, but it's not reliable. And what do you do when it's not there? And this idea also of intuition, I very much like the empowerment of thinking that with enough time, we can make many things intuitive. We can make ourselves, first of all, we are always shifting. The self that I bring now and the self that I bring tomorrow is not the same. The self that I bring in 10 minutes is not the same. I very much, to me, the idea, especially when working with young people, that intuition is not a fixed quantity, and it is not something that you're either born with and maybe you're lucky and you'll be one of the creative ones, And if not, well, too bad. Go do something else. This is not a useful concept. It's much more, I think it's much more empowering to think that, yes, we can make this part of us. And here's a pathway to do it. And here are principles that guide us. Pay attention to this, that, and here. May I make a connection between some of this thinking and what Andrea was
Please.
talking about? And what was, I think, Andrea, it was fascinating that you, just the confluence of your activity and this presentation on the same day, because I think it's very often we pay a lot of attention to the task itself and making the task occupy less and less and less attentional space so that we can indeed devote our attention to things like our students and watching the movers in the room and this other complexity. But I think you can flip that, which is by asking, okay, well, how can we actually expand the space itself? And for me, not to be a pessimist, but an easier way to look at it is to, again, flip it and say, well, what are the things that we do to ourselves inadvertently that contract the space, that make it more difficult? Enter stress, and the appearance of how important sleep is, the appearance of how important good diet and nutrition and health is, but also of mental practices. It's the gymnastics of meditation. Meditation is really, meditation is another one of these vagaries, because to say meditation, that's like saying sports, like which sport? But one thing that often they have in common is this attention to one thing, this not shifting of attention, this awareness of shifting of attention. When we shift our attention, we contract our space. But in focusing on the voice, like you had us do, in focusing on one another, in listening intently to one another, in listening intently to the ways that our voice meshes or does not mesh, we're focusing on a single subject. And this is over time also a way of expanding, I think, the attentional space. And Jeanette, I think that this is what you were talking about as well with your student. What a wonderful tool and what a simple tool to be able to do, just to sing with somebody for a few minutes and harmonize with them. Be in dissonance with them, feel that. But whatever it is, what a beautiful way to expand eventually the attentional space.
Well, all right then. Thank you so much, Guy. That was outstanding and so nice to make those extra connections. Look at us with 3 minutes left. This is how it goes at the VDM. We are about at time. I would like to while we got everybody that's here. I just want to say, if you missed Fabian's masterclass this weekend, you missed really a wonderful time. But you can still watch it. You can register, and we'll send you links. We'll send you links where you can go and see it. Fabian Spent introduced actually two things that fit beautifully into the more global Dalcroze conversation, and yet both of them are things that we see less of. There are fewer people who teach with these techniques. One is with this idea of using syllables. So he used sort of, in America, we might say a scat syllable, but there's a specific pedigree for the syllables that he's using. And also he sets up with the Takatina inspired different versions of steps and claps and sort of polyrhythms in the body as two lenses to explore a piece of music, to think about your own musicianship and your own physical presence in the music. And anytime I've done this work under Fabian, I've just always found it exhilarating. And this weekend was very much the same. So Fabian, thank you again for sharing that with us. And for anybody who wasn't there, just register and you can take the class too. It was really lovely. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us and for contributing. We hope you'll come back and join more of the VDMs and participate as much as you can. And Guy, I just feel like you and me personally have all kinds of work to do in the future. Like I'm not sure where it is, but at some point we're going to hang out and find some way to collaborate. So thank you also for being here. Well, friends, it's 2:59. We try to start on time and end on time. So thank you so much for being here. Veronica is visiting with family. I think she's on a plane ride right now, which is why she's not here. So thank you for your patience with me without my great colleagues who keep things moving better than me alone. Emma Shubin also is teaching now. She would right about now make the plug that says, if you know anybody who needs a scholarship, tell them to reach out. We're really happy to give that money away. And otherwise, please go to the website, virtualdalcroze.org, click on the calendar. You can subscribe to that calendar, so it'll just automatically populate in the correct time zone wherever you are, so you'll know when things are happening. And so consider subscribing to the calendar, and we'll see you. I think we have another meetup coming before we have another masterclass. So peace, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thank you.